I could actually say things about feminism and a woman's place and how the world changes when a woman stays in the room. Mm-hmm. And Marvel, especially Kevin, being like, go, write it.
You're always a freak, Kevin. It's just now the ugly is also on the outside.
She's the woman who's supposed to be on the sidelines pining for Steve Rogers. And we're like, nope.
Steve Rogers. Steve! Steve? Where's Steve Rogers? Steve! You're my hero, Steve. I mean, you're a hero.
I absolutely love that.
The episode opens up with a monologue from the Watcher about the endless possibilities within the multiverse so vast. We see images of Black Panther, Iron Man, and a white Michael Jackson as a Brie Larson, and a bunch of other visuals that support the claim that there are numerous realities out there. Enter, what if Captain Carter were the first Avenger? And so we lurk into the world of 1940s. Peggy and Steve Rogers approach the testing grounds for what would be Project Rebirth.
Paris has fallen. London might be next, if this works.
The two approach Dr. Erskine, and when asked to leave the room, this is the response we get.
No, I'd prefer to stay.
There. That's the moment that created a new universe.
The choice that changed the course of history and branched off into another reality is that Peggy Carter wanted to stay in the room. Okay. There are multiple problems with this. In the original, this exchange happens at a moment when Steve is rested within the Vita Ray chamber.
Agent Carter, don't you think it would be more comfortable in the booth?
Oh yes, of course, sorry.
Here it's at the moment they enter the room. Even before she said this line, there are fundamental differences within the universe. Not to mention the back and forth about how Paris has fallen never actually happened. Man, this is so much better. I miss Phase 1. And out of all the places you choose to have this line delivered, it's here. It's not like these two were sitting in a car just a minute ago where this exchange would have been best suited. And for those wondering why does this matter, right away we're at a contradictory point. We're told a single choice will mark the start of a new universe, new outcomes, new results. The problem being we already have new results, new outcomes, and technically a new universe. So the Watcher, who is supposed to be one of the most objective beings in the galaxy, right out the gate is an unreliable narrator.
There, that's the moment that created a new universe.
Oh, what's more, in this version, Dr. Erskine delivers this line.
Agent Carter, wouldn't you be more comfortable in the booth?
Just as he sees Steve and Peggy enter the room. This was his first thought to ever grace his mind. Here it's played up like he's specifically singling her out among the sea of men surrounding them, whereas in the original it was an actual reminder for Peggy to join up with the others. Yes, all the other men that were already sitting in the booth because they were just about to start. And guess what? She doesn't stand and sit in the back. She's given a seat at the front row because she's a lady and a respected individual. But okay, that clearly doesn't have the baggage you wanted, so you gotta go out of your way to contradict your own source material because you wish to make the moment more empowering and progressive.
No!
They use the idea of leaving the room as some kind of microaggression that facilitates their narrative that she shouldn't be here because she's a woman, and boy oh boy do they remind you of this a lot.
Be grateful you're in the room and not being brought up on charges of insubordination. Greatest minds alive.
And Stark is one of them.
This doesn't concern you. You're lucky to be in the room.
When asked to leave the room, Margaret Peggy Carter chose to stay.
No longer screaming to be heard, to be seen, to be in the room.
To be respected.
You'd need the stopper to get close.
Colonel, you're lucky to even be in the room.
Stop it! Wait, what is that? Is that? Ew! That's a woman! 2 women's? 3 women's? 4 women's? More women's? Sort of makes you think now, doesn't it? It's almost like the social commentary doesn't belong here. This tells me that while rewatching the movies in preparation to write the script for a What If episode, You weren't trying to figure out the best way to give birth to a new universe in a way that made sense and honored the original. No, you were more focused on finding an angle at which you could leverage a feminist message by pulling it out of where it never existed. You heard what was said and you told yourself, let's turn that into a woman being told off, when in reality it was a safety precaution. Any unnecessary person within the operation floor has to get out. Generally, you should let the men and women do their job without distractions. I can imagine if this was some kind of surgical procedure and one of the people who come to observe don't get behind the glass because they don't want to leave the room. No, you have to leave. You're a distraction. You need to leave. This isn't something you get to decide on. Go away or leave completely. Everyone needs to be at their best. There's a lot at stake here if you didn't notice. And the writers acknowledge how stupid this is by having everyone stay in that room. What's better than one distraction? 20 of them. You also gotta take note of the 2 executions. In Captain America the First Avenger, we follow Peggy's reaction because she's an important character. Her reaction to the experiment is important. It clues us in on the significance of the events, it helps the scene build up a level of anticipation, and it continues to define her character. In What If, it's about how she's standing in the back of the room behind all the men. This serves no purpose other than to reiterate what we already knew in this universe, and that is how Peggy is downplayed for being a woman. Ah, yes, there is more. It is within this moment that the double agent decides to set off the explosive, and she is the only person to somehow spot the bomb, recognize that it is a bomb, then straight away look at the guy who is about to set it off, recognize the fact that he is doing it precisely that, and finally, she's able to react to it, showing us there was no doubt in her mind they were all going to get blown into teeny bits. And just like that, we've opened another can of worms. Number 1, if she was able to spot the thing so easily, that just makes all these guys look like morons for not noticing a bomb sitting out in the open. Number 2, if the bomb is easily recognizable, that once you see it, you know what it is, how would the German actually expect this to work by putting it out in the open for everyone to see? The fact that it did somehow work is ridiculous. I mean, come on, it's right next to his foot. By Peggy being the only one alerted tells me one of 2 things. Either you wanted her to be the only amazing, competent person in the room, or you wanted to have your cake and eat it. Number 3, when did he place that thing on the floor in front of all these people in that particular spot? What if someone stepped on it before the commencement? That would mean the mission is a failure. Again, this guy is stupid for thinking this would be a smart thing to do. Number 4, Peggy doesn't use her gun. She's always the last one to hesitate. She's the first one to use it in the film, actually. The subject is also right in the open. You're a sharpshooter. No need to worry about attracting attention since you've already done that by screaming and contributing nothing when the occasion called for it. Lives are in danger, including your own. Why is your first reaction tackling this guy while his thumb is already on the trigger? Yeah, this is the writing in general. And number 5, Peggy's decision to stay in the room doesn't have a direct correlation with the German spy, and this is where the problem comes up. At this time, there is no evidence that the serum works. For all he knows, the solution could kill you or disfigure your face. That was the entire point of detonating the bomb later. To reiterate, in the film, it's only when he sees that the serum works that he leaves the bomb, sets off the distraction, grabs the spare vial, and books it to the exit. All of this hinges on the fact that the serum works. If his objective is different here than in the original, then we have yet another variable within this universe already taking place before Peggy's decision to stay in the room. The explosion then goes off in the spot where they're all standing, including the bomber. Of course, all are injured or killed, with the exception of... You had to get rid of all the men just to ensure it was her who got in, okay? Don't judge. How did she survive? Fireproof? Was there a fridge somewhere around here? Or did she find a nice rock to hide under? Oh, my bad. Colonel Phillips and the spies somehow survived too. Plot armor, you know. To make it extra comedic, the German operative comes out of the flames and smoke just in case he didn't care to think about the improbability of him getting caught in that. This plan just keeps getting dumber and dumber. The bad guy randomly decides to turn around for no other reason than to shoot Colonel Phillips. We see a frame of him alive, just so that we could see him get shot. And if you're wondering what the point was of surviving the explosion if he was going to die a second later, it was to muster up an artificial reason for Steve to leave the Vita Ray chamber. Rogers gets shot, or at least I think he does. It's like he gets shot by nothing. Let's just go with that. I don't know, maybe it was the sound that was too loud and made him fall. Peggy Carter somehow remembers she has a gun, and just like that, there's no one else in the room to take the serum. What are the chances? I mean, Peggy goes in for the action, and this guy named John Flynn, who you've never heard of before, survives as well, you know, since he's relevant to the story too, because yeah. This explosion sure is selective. I mean, at this point, are you guys sure there isn't a single man who survived that and could take the serum? Apparently, he's only appeared in a one-shot short film about Peggy Carter before and nothing else. Let me reiterate that for those who don't see right away what we're dealing with here. The guy who was never in the first Avenger is now in this scene. Yet another change that should pass this world off as a different universe long before Peggy's decision to stay in the room. But the writers again couldn't be bothered to care about that. Now it's all about her story. Now don't expect any pain while undergoing such a procedure. Phase 4 of the MCU wouldn't allow for that. But Peggy isn't skinny, therefore she wouldn't need the same amount of muscle growth. Oh, don't you be getting technical with me here. If anything, she should be a hulking monster right now, dripping with pure muscle. As for Rogers, he's doing what any character would be doing after getting shot.
Peggy?
Just chilling on the floor. You know. And that is the start of the episode, and already it's a failure by all means. Don't worry, we're not going to be breaking down every scene. As for the rest of the episode, it's nothing but Peggy going on various missions. Now we have to talk about the biggest flaw of this show by far, which is the pace. Usually I prefer cartoons to live action series because they tend to do much more in less time. On top of that, there are no budgetary restrictions to visibly hinder the storytelling. Here we get the opposite of that. Things move way too fast, there's not enough time to develop anything, and that's not even a critique of cartoons because this episode is almost 30 minutes long. Animated shows tend to nail down everything within a 22 minutes runtime and no pacing problems. This is like if you took the war montage from the first Cap film and you just made it the entire episode. Maybe that's why I can't bring myself to care about anything that happens. It's all so rushed. And I think you can pin it all down to the lack of an original direction. Your idea was to do the first Avenger, only swap Steve with Peggy, and instead of telling your own story that has its own flow, you're going through the motions of doing what someone else already did, only in less time, less impact, and less skill. The famous dancing exchange between Peggy and Steve falls completely flat now. It's only here because you like what it represents, and not because it's earned. You can't help but realize how cheap the execution is.
Then we better start dancing!
Not to mention, Steve's looks like a washed up, unshaven, drunk uncle. I understand you don't want to pay for Chris Evans' face, but at least try to make the guy look normal. His lines often don't sound like something Steve would say.
Did you have something against running away?
You start running, they'll never let you stop. You stand up, you push back. Can't say no forever, right?
Must be nice. I'm still that skinny kid from Brooklyn. Now just in a big metal suit.
You're more than...
And for some reason they keep giving him this weird rapey face.
I was much of a dancer anyway.
There's a lot of it. Aside from the romance that you fail to do justice, there's nothing in this episode to invest you emotionally.
Owe me a dance.
Nothing. The only other emotional beat the episode relies on is feminism.
Promised an army. I was promised peace and salvation. Instead, I get a girl.
In this episode, you cannot get away for a second from the overabundant female power, "we can do it" messaging. What you see at the beginning is only a taste. Peggy's journeys as a super soldier is based on nothing but on men downplaying her or commenting about the fact that she is a woman.
Women aren't soldiers. They sure as hell don't fight on the front lines. You might break a nail.
Thought you Brits were supposed to be resilient.
Oh, just the men, apparently.
Sending in a fragile Fraulein to fight for them.
Since when did dames fight like that? So a dame and a flying Buick.
She should never have been in the field in the first place.
I get it, it's the 40s. Now can we get to the actual character work? And it's here that lies the problem. With Steve, we understood why he wanted to enlist in the army. We understood what adversities he had to face. For Peggy, her storyline is all about the girl power subtext that don't tell you anything about what makes her tick as a hero of her own. Her story arc boils down to being immensely good at everything, and it's only others who have to deal with it. Oh, and she wants to dance with the skinny kid. In fact, she's a better Captain America than Steve Rogers could have ever been. She prevents the Red Skull from getting his hands on the Cosmic Cube, unlike Steve. She breaks into the Hydra base all by herself, unlike Steve. She saves Bucky, unlike Steve. Everything we see her do is basically, you guessed it, better than Steve. She's an indestructible force, breaking and slicing through everyone like she's the Hulk or something. We don't see Rogers come close to any of this. Actually, forget about Captain America. She's also the better Wonder Woman. You guys gave a whole new meaning to letting someone copy your homework, right down to the signed first and last name on the top corner of the page, the weaponry, the power scale, the moves, and then some. I mean, Wonder Woman is a puny god next to her. You should be embarrassed of yourself. You took Diana's character beat for beat, and then you turn it up to an 11. I'm not sure Wonder Woman could perform any of this herself. It's an understatement how careless these guys went overboard with the power scaling here. Suddenly she can push interdimensional creatures that likely have the weight of the Empire State Building, if not more. Let's face it, the tentacles are only the tip of the iceberg. Which now begs the question, why wasn't she doing any of this in the first place?
Peggy, no!
I have to. I can end this.
You owe me a dance lesson!
The writing is ridiculous. While everyone around her is made to look stupid or stuck, it is always up to Peggy to act and to come up with an idea anyone could have thought of. I mean, she's the only one to think of interrogating an enemy while everyone is just moping around. Like, come on.
I will tell you nothing.
He told me everything.
She's the only one that does anything of matter with the exception of Steve once or twice. She's also extremely well versed in mythology, she leaps buildings in a single bound, and she even puts Howard Stark to shame.
If I can get to the controls, I might be able to transpose the ingress and do science stuff.
You mean transpose the polarity and reverse the suction?
Hey, shut up. Get out.
Might as well not even be there. Like, writing characters in such a way is so pointless because then everyone else around them is just useless. The only things that are keeping her down are the men.
Someday your blood might tell us how to make a real super soldier.
And the plot. And once the writers just kind of say screw it, then even the plot doesn't matter all that much. Okay. She is the smartest, brightest, strongest, and most flawless being to grace any room, so might as well ask her to leave one. Although, not guaranteed she will. Is there anything this character doesn't know or cannot do? The answer is of course no. When do we get to learn what drives Peggy Carter? Why did she join the army? What makes her worthy of the serum? Here's some feminism instead.
Ironically, the what if was already kind of established for the first one, which is what if Agent Carter became the first Avenger?
Totally.
But for me, looking into it was like, no. It's what if a woman stays in the room?
Yeah.
What happens when a woman is giving a chance to have a point of view, have a voice, to carry a shield, both literally and metaphorically? Well, then the world changes. Everything
That's
changes.
awesome.
And what does the head writer think of the original Peggy Carter? Well, let's see.
She's the woman who is not supposed to be in the room. She's the woman who's supposed to be on the sidelines pining for Steve Rogers. And we're like, nope. We're going to show a woman who knows her worth and see how that changes the world.
I absolutely love that.
Speaking of which, you don't need to wear an armor plank on top of your chest to make yourself look more like a dude. And while we're on the topic of the costume, this show says Peggy had a USO girl costume. This means that all this time, she was supposed to be carrying out the role of a cheerleader button, heels, and a flag dress. Do you smell it?
Breathe it in. That's
This doesn't make any sense. Correct me if I'm wrong. Shouldn't a USO girl costume consist of the USA flag? You want to deprive America of its heroes wearing American symbols? At least put more effort into it.
You're not brave. Men are brave.
The art style ranges in quality. In certain shots it can look pretty and dazzling, while in others it's exceptionally ugly, specifically those character designs. And the animation has ought to be one of its weakest elements. The models, especially in action, bend like some kind of sausage. Smooth animation doesn't mean anything if the character bends her body to an inhuman extent. It ends up looking so awkward. The characters are extremely stiff yet very loose at the same time. Not so supple, are we? Almost as though her bones are made of rubber. This makes me wonder if that's the reason why the action is so limited. Too many times in a row do I see her smack people with the shield in a very similar manner. It's jarring. You feel it, you see it. What would you have done without those Wonder Woman references? Heck, even with them you suck. Look no further than the famous MCU scenes. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of those times when you try to recreate one of your favorite art pieces. As you look at your finished drawings compared to the original, you then think to yourself, when did it all went wrong? The head is smaller, the pose is much less dynamic, one of the limbs is out of proportion with the other. It's nothing more than a cheap copy. Suddenly something what seemed to be trivial like simple finger placement makes all the difference. It's like you sucked out the soul out of the original. Look, I'll be honest, the animation of the movement looks like it was done in Gary's mod. Marvel Studios uses the 3D animation process that imitates 2D animation akin to Into the Spider-Verse. Mine is the resources, time, and effort required to make the most out of it. You aim for Spider-Verse and you end up with a slightly prettier to look at Dragon Prince. Yikes. It's not good and they obviously announced a season 2. Now I'm hearing Marvel Studios wants to do more projects like these. Why? And at last, my final issue with this episode is it often goes against the premise of its own series. As established previously, there are things in this episode that change a multitude of things long before the presumed to be established Nexus event. This show isn't really a what if when you're changing things and shifting major historical events prior to this major choice that is going to branch off into a separate new timeline. In the original film, the Red Skull gets his hands on the Tesseract days, if not weeks, preceding the birth of the first ever super soldier. What followed was Steve's enlisting, Steve's enrollment, Steve's training, and finally the eventual day in which he takes in the serum. In What If, everything is out of order prior to this moment. In other words, Peggy's decision shouldn't have changed the outcome of the Red Skull's mission in Norway when it already happened within the timeline. And this is something that's not up for dispute. You cannot change any of this, because all these decisions and events are a reaction to one another. That would be like if John Wick first got his dog killed, and then he encountered the son of the mob boss at the gas station after that point. You've messed with the order of things, and you break the rules of the multiverse. Bravo! Here's another one. The dancing line was first introduced in the car on their way to the facility. Here it's introduced after the whole incident occurred. Howard Stark builds an Iron Man suit in the 1940s. He has one sitting in the back, and although at first glance they require the Tesseract to properly power it, they then use a generator to make it fully functional. A generator with equal the power of the cosmic cube. Makes you wonder why this Howard Stark didn't build any of these in the 1940s. Oh, right, because he couldn't even get a car to fly. Yet another inconsistency within the universe. Which brings us to the Red Skull, who knew about the existence of the squid monster all this time in the first movie and just didn't bother to tell anyone. Then again, it serves the purpose here that the Red Skull is an outright buffoon here, because we all know all Yahtzees are dumb. They have to be. In the original, Schmidt betrays Hitler when he harnesses the power of the gods. In this version, he does so after he loses? What? Why is this guy making a power play with no ace up his sleeve? If your ace up your sleeve was Cthulhu, the only way to actually contact him is through the cosmic cube, which you just lost.
The Third Reich will fall,
and Hydra will rise from its ashes.
The science division is going against the entire country that it belongs to.
You have bet the survival of the resistance on bad odds and put us all at risk?
Please. Hitler would have destroyed him. Might I add, Peggy and Stark knowing of the Tesseract and its sheer power creates a lot of problems. How did they know about it, unlike in the first Avenger? Or did they know? So then why is it only now they're interested in it? How stupid do you have to be to ignore that kind of threat before? And why are you guys the only ones to know about this? A lot of question marks that these people will not be bothered to account for. Even if we were to ignore all of these events, you're left with a flaw that walks all over the fundamental rules of the multiverse. And that is the law of causality, also known as cause and effect, which states states that every change in nature is produced by some cause. Let's go back to where this rule was first created, Avengers Endgame. The cause: the Avengers go back in time. The effect: Stark gets a heart attack and Loki escapes. Boom! A new universe. This is how a new reality is born. This was an important rule established to explain the multiverse. So it is as a result of an outside force, in this case the Avengers, that we can now have an alternative timeline. Can anyone tell me what the cause was for Captain Carter? There was none. There is no cause. It's all an effect. There is no Avengers interfering with the timeline here. There is no God changing things around. The only person we know here is Uatu, and he's only the Watcher with no influence on anything. There was no cause that could lead Peggy to stay in the room. Therefore, there should be no alternative timeline. When it comes to the other episodes, they ignore that rule completely, hoping no one else will really point it out. They are really that lazy. But it is a huge gaping hole that is going to plague the MCU going forward. As if Loki's plot holes weren't enough. Now, in the What If comics, this wouldn't play much of a factor, because those stories were always treated as nothing more than rewritten outcomes done for the amusement of the fans. They weren't trying to explain it or incorporate it to the time travel based rules of the multiverse. If you didn't want to have this problem, you shouldn't have made a rule about it. And if your role as a screenwriter is to create a story around those set rules, you have to follow them. Failing to do so tells me once again you failed at your job. This is why What If right out the gate is a disastrous failure, and so are the other episodes, but I'm not really to talk about them right now. As a whole, the writers cannot be bothered to stay true to the spirit of the comics, nor the rules of the movie universe. If they made these many omissions, it tells me they had no effort in making this the best story possible. They weren't focusing on giving their all. As an audience member, that is incredibly disappointing, because right now the stories are written without any care or thought put behind them. It's really going to have a snowball effect in the near future of the MCU, because these creators don't look at the laws and rules created within the universe. They don't waste time on trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together, making sure the story doesn't go off the rail and that it is consistent with everything that came before, so that everything makes sense and respects the audience. But this should be the fun part of writing. To them, they see a character like Bucky and think to themselves, hey, what if there was a scene where our main character pulls him by the hand and he says,
Thanks, you almost ripped my arm off!
That's it. That's all, folks. That's the depth of these characters to them. And if they can leave a preachy message somewhere along the way, perfect. So yeah, that's my analysis of episode 1 of What If. I don't know if I will be interested in reviewing future episodes of this series, and I do not know if I will have enough willpower to do that. This one hit close home because it's a Captain America related episode. So thank you for watching, and be on the lookout for future episodes. See ya.